Hello and welcome to the Identity Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Caleb. It is a pleasure as always to be able to host this show. We're so excited for this week's show, March 3rd. We are here. We are continuing our sustainability series. It's going to be a great one. Very excited for our guest. Lots of really intriguing things that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about veganism and kind of this crisis around it. We'll be talking about Black and brown healing and just on and on and on, all kinds of things. But I'm going to go ahead and bring on my fellow and lovely co-host, Tarik.
What's up, everybody?
Hey. I tell you, I need like a button that's like a crowd applause.
No, one day we're going to get that. But everyone out there, I appreciate the applause, silent or not. Definitely jump in those comments. We love that you're here. We're happy to be here with you. So we're live. We're in the flesh. It's this Wednesday. I don't know. How's the weather been over there, man?
Oh, beautiful.
It's been a little chilly. It's been chilly, but also really nice over here. But
really,
what were you saying?
It was beautiful. I wore shorts today. I let my pale legs out in the sun.
Oh my God.
I was vibing, dude. I was having fun outside. I was certainly grooving today. I had my earbuds in, listening to some good old 80s alternative rock, and I was just vibing. So you know us hippies, right? just having fun. But once again,
health is wealth, man, and that's why we're here today. So everyone tuning in, we appreciate our guest. Let's bring her on with us, Lisa Betty. Oh wait, we don't have the applause. We don't have the applause yet. Yes, we're here. This is organic. I honestly like to make it always feel like we're all in the same living room, even though we're coming from such different walks of life and different spaces. So I hope this feels just as cozy, audio-wise as well as visual. But checking in, how's your March going so far?
It's going well. It's actually Black Women's History Week. So
yes, it is, indeed.
And it ends today, actually. So
what a way to end it, right? I'm so glad to have you on. What a great representation for sure. So how have you been celebrating all week? Have you been doing other podcasts? What's the deal?
Doing my normal day-to-day work. I'm a course instructor at Fordham, so just trying to teach these, college students just regular things, just like
out of the way,
like PowerPoint. Like at this point, it's very difficult to push them because they're not as engaged as usual, because everything is remote. So you have to kind of push them a little bit more and check in with them a little bit more than usual, on regular things.
What age group
18, 19.
Wow, what a generation. These are the ones that are inheriting the earth right now, right? Indeed.
And mostly freshmen. So they were not, from the time that they graduated from high school to now, it's just kind of like, this is not what they were thinking. Their first college experiences would be, they were not thinking that some of their first college classes would be from home with their family, doing random things in the back.
yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, look at us right now. Did we think we were going to be here? Not a chance. I'm glad that we have this virtual platform for sure, but there's positives and negatives to this entire thing. I guess we can get into the social implications of that for sure. I would love to hear just your story. I mean, here at the Identity Podcast, we're here to just open up the floor. I know you're here for a particular topic, but there may be a whole hour of you just revisiting things that's been on your mind before we even get to that buzz, because we're here to celebrate you. Again, this is the last day. I'm sorry we were only able to get this on the tail end, but we got a chance to get some other BIPOC for the rest of the month. So we're going to definitely make up for that. But I'm so glad to have you here with us in the flesh. So what's been on your mind? What's been the thing?
I mean, right now, just, health and wellness, colonialism, cultural appropriation, all of that, farm workers, that's been the heavy lifting that's been on my mind, thinking about all those things, and connecting it to my family's heritage, or even just why am I here in this specific country, in the Northeast, in this urban space, like, why am I here, versus where my, ancestors and lineage actually comes from, which is the Caribbean and the the South of the United States. So it's just kind of like, why am I here, first generation, in this space, attempting to find who I am with the little things that we have up here, but reclaim or remake or be who I am in this space. So making all those connections, I think, has been important at this point.
It sure enough is. It definitely is. Like, would you say that it's been more recent that you've been on this journey, or have you always been trying to discover the depths of identity? Because I can share that for sure. My dad has pushed the ancestry.com, and I've just looked into the depths of just where I come from, whether it be indigenous, like you said, or just coming from other sorts of, the planet, or if we get super spiritual, just the sun itself. But I think that a lot of this has been self-reflective in 2020, and it's been a long time coming for me. So I'm glad to have more conscious beings kind of connect and speak about this on a platform that everyone can understand.
To be very honest, I mean, it's been about 7 years in the making for me. That type of, I think it was like December 2012 is when I became like, really just everything needs to change. And, but before that, or now it's 8 years, but heading into its 8th year. But before that, I've always been like that person to ask questions. And a lot of the time it was, I was very much, ostracized because I would talk about things like white supremacy, like very easily. Since a child, like 15 years old, talking about white
when do you think that started? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we usually go like all the way back. Like, when did you first start thinking like this before you even got into sustainable health? You think it started out with just the rebellion against colonialism and what it truly is, the face of it,
my family, like my entire family's into, or I'll say my grandmother is a farmer from Jamaica, farmer and a nurse and a healer from Jamaica. So being raised by a woman who was very uncomfortable, or co-raised, because she was in our house and was there for till I was about 9 or 10, till for 10 years living with my grandma and having her a part of my life, and her raising us in a type of way. I saw how uncomfortable she was in this space. Like, it wasn't her space. Like, and how she tried to reclaim certain things and go to certain stores and and connect in certain ways, and how it was almost impossible for her. So when I was 10, she moved back to Jamaica. And, she's a farmer in Jamaica, has land and all of that stuff, and, has her house, and her house is by a river, and all of those things. She created a wonderful life for herself there. But I always wondered why she went back, because I didn't understand, I thought that at that time I had been to Jamaica at 5 years old, been to Jamaica at 3 months, but then again at 5 years old. And I didn't really understand. I knew that where we lived in Jamaica is far from any town. It's 2 hours, a 2-hour drive up the mountain from the town of Morant Bay, which is more of a town center in the parish that my family lives in. And then that Morant Bay is 2 hours from Kingston. And so, like, to even get to a hospital as a person, and I knew she always would go to the hospital, every 2 months, but maybe she was also preparing for travel, like making sure she got everything that she needed, making sure that she was in good health so that she can move back. But when she left, I didn't understand why someone who is, at that time she was 77, would leave. And she's an older person, and who's going to take care of her, and who's going to help her? And where are the hospitals? And I'm thinking in ways of not only who's going to help her, but that the world that we live in is a space that has things that her particular town the town that she's from in Jamaica doesn't. So I was thinking in kind of like scarcity, and in a colonial way, but not even thinking in a colonial way, but just like, I think maybe just kind of wanting to understand why. So maybe that was the first phase of saying that there's something in this space that is yours, that you have, that she has, that is very different from the space that where you're in, where you are. It's kind of, it's a scarcity model. Where she's from, it's abundance. Like, she doesn't have to go to the grocery store. She has a farm. Like, you know what I mean? She has everything.
Straight from
While,
God, right? That's like,
yeah, like while we're just trying to navigate different systems for even food resources, she has a farm. She has a house that is hers outright. She has so much. While we were renting, while there was all types of things going on, for my family that didn't, that created, kind of food insecurity and things like that, where my grandmother in Jamaica just didn't necessarily experience in the same way, because she had community, she had her own farm, and she had her own space. So it was the reality growing up that she has, like, why are we here if we have so much there? And you never think about that when you talk about spaces that are defined as third world, as spaces of abundance. But they are. That's why they're third world. That's why they're overexploited spaces and countries. You know what I mean? That's why the global South, now it's global South, but the global South is overexploited because it is abundant. It is abundant in resources. It is abundant in different types of seeds and different types of ways of being. It's very abundant, in natural springs and in vegetation, in animals and beauty. So it's just kind of like, I knew that as a child. So when we moved to an all white neighborhood and they would talk about how they would go to Jamaica for vacation, and that was where my family is from, there was those two types of just kind of like seeing tourism as colonialism, seeing like, my grandma lives there and I can't even visit my grandma because we don't have the type of money to do that, and I'm worried about my grandmother, every day or every Sunday when my mom calls her, just thinking about, if she hurts herself, like, how's she going to get help? Who's going to help her? Because we're not there. And you just went to Jamaica for the weekend. Like, so those thoughts were very, I really did, politicize, colonialism was politicized very early for me, just knowing that, particularly white American people, wealthy white American people around me were going to Jamaica for the weekend, and how, my family, with me, I hadn't been to Jamaica at that point. I'll say up to when my grandma died. Well, I hadn't been to Jamaica for about 20 years. I went to Jamaica when I was 25 and or 26. And then my grandma died when I was 19. So, and I couldn't go to her funeral because we didn't have the money, because I was just, I was in college and we were trying to figure out. And, and 2 months before she died, I actually sent her a package with money that I got. It's called, I know for any of my George Washington friends, George Washington University that I met there, they had this thing called G World, and you could go to CVS with it early on. This was 15 years ago. You go to CVS and do different things with it. And so I was getting my grandma's stuff with my G World card. That's the I'm sending remittances with college money. You know what I mean? And so those realities too, so I'm just, it's a lot of just like intersections where I thought of colonialism, and then I didn't name it decolonization, but it was that type of process of understanding these systems that restricted me from even seeing my grandmother, but allowed particularly wealthy white people, or not even just even regular white people, to go to Jamaica real quick. Because if there's a sale, you know what I mean? A JetBlue sale, go to Jamaica real quick and, have the time of their lives. And then, make sure they have soda in styrofoam plates so they have to go. So, you know what I mean? And do the type of tourism that is, the anti-environmentalism type tourism, and then go on their merry way. Where it took me a while to go back to Jamaica until I was 26. And when I went with supplies, and I went with intention, and I went with creating to visit a community, and it was academic, and I also went to visit family, and it was very much a coming home. It wasn't just a quick vacation, which I don't want to say that people can't enjoy themselves in this space, and now that things are easier and accessible, but at the same time we do have to understand where tourism and where homecoming or home finding kind of moves in, and people are kind of moving in different ways, and community building and diasporic community building is very different from just like tourism. And I think when people travel to these spaces, particularly the Caribbean, Africa, South America, Central America, and Southeast Asia, they have to be very cognizant of those types of things, cognizant of colonization as tourism, and cognizant that there's people who are attempting to find home in diaspora and connection, and help people who are already building in those spaces really build in really intentional, sustainable, and indigenous types of ways. So it started with the question.
That. We're not gonna just breeze past all of that great stuff you're doing. Wow.
It started with the question of why my grandma was going back to Jamaica when I was 10, and being like, what does Jamaica have that we don't have here? And then after that, I learned that Jamaica has everything, and we had everything. But at the same time, colonization is still happening. Neocolonialization is still happening. Neocolonialism is still happening. So we have to, I even have to navigate differently in Jamaica, just knowing that, because things are moving in really particular ways down there. But yeah, that's kind of where that identity of thinking about whiteness, decolonization, and capitalism, and just the farming community my family's from, really developed my way of being, as just kind of like, I come from an alternative space. And with time, my identity has been coming closer and closer to that alternative space, where I literally want to be just like my grandmother. Like,
wow.
That's who I want to be. Yeah, I want to be just like her, because she had everything, even when, her, without the generational curses, because she was also half white. So there's a lot of issues with that.
Okay.
With people who are biracial in the Caribbean, and colorism and anti-Blackness, and, and then, having basically a white supremacist father in the house, you know what I mean? And then a very dark-skinned mother in the house. And just like how, my great-grandmother wasn't necessarily taken seriously as a dark-skinned Black woman, and how my great-grandfather was always exalted. And we even have a picture of him. And it's just like, we don't have a picture of my great-grandmother. So it's like those small things that, that generational curse needs to go. But
so true. Yeah.
But everything else that she kept, which is a lot to do with what I know her mother taught her, because there's no way a Scottish man taught my grandmother how to do certain things. Maybe farming of certain things, like, but maybe, not cassava. Like maybe asparagus, because he ate asparagus, so maybe that. But cassava, no. Like, eating a plantain, no. Maybe he learned some things, but she's learned. Those are things that are, our African heritage, the Afro-Indigenous heritage.
Not be denied, indeed.
Yeah, it's coming from those spaces. So she kept a lot of those practices, even though that there were those issues within our family of colorism and things like that. My grandmother was definitely like a Afro-Jamaican woman, like an African Jamaican woman, because the way she navigated, what she knew, the healing practices that she had, how she prayed, how she did things. And I'm just like, so and how she acted towards me, that like we were very much very close. So maybe I was put into the world to show her that there's a different way of being, and that she needs to connect more with her, just connect more with who she is rather than who she wants to project to the world.
Shout out to the matriarchs of families and all of that on such a wonderful month. That was quite a lot. I had lots of notes here. Of course, I was taking some notes and stuff. But yeah, if we just want to take off of that point, it kind of brings into question what you really feel is the matriarch and what that divine feminine really means. The true abundance of the wealth of childbirth and procreation, and just like you said, the knowledge of arts, taking care of so many members. And I mean, it all goes back to health and wealth. Like we always think about our moms when we think about our food, our navel, all of our sacral chakras all come from this, feeling of security. So, I mean, I'm so happy that you had that experience with your grandmother. God rest her soul for sure. But, obviously those lands are yours as well. And those lands are your grandmother. So I was wondering, have you entered into the farming space as well? Or do you have a green thumb? Or yeah.
I have entered into a farming space. It's not that I don't have a green thumb. I just don't have I know I'm not putting my energy towards it in the way that I have to put my energy towards different things. So I think the space and the spirit is pushing me towards, truly kind of investing in my green thumb, because it's something that you just can't like text and think, oh, it works.
Right.
It's like being really connected to the vegetation around you, especially if you want the vegetation to create something that you can eat. It's different than just having a plant that's like cute in your house. But
there's a lot of people that think they have a green thumb by having that, for sure. I do think yeah, go ahead.
And it's like, and it's a cute plant is good too, but there's a different space. Like I have friends that are literally growing in their backyard. I have about and even some on their fire places too. So it's a bit different to get into that space, but it's accessible. Anyone can develop that.
Right.
So that's learned. A green thumb is learned. That's what I kind of came from certain spaces with. But yeah, I really got into the urban farming space when I arrived in New York in 2013.
How was that?
It was interesting. Me and my good friend Whitney actually arrived in New York around the same time from DC, and we were just like reclaiming our life in space in a particular type of way. And we both never really talked about farming, but then she got a volunteership at the Brooklyn Grange, and I was taking an urban agriculture class as a part of a program that I was with at NYU. And then one day that we would just I said, on Saturdays that it was my job to water the crops, because it was like the summer. It was a summer course to water the crops, and she would just come with me, and then we were just like barefoot watering crops. And the amount of people of color, particularly immigrants, or like first generation people really, who were passing by us from Ethiopia, Mexico, Jamaica, like, because I would hear accents and people talking that would just like look at us and be like, wow, women and men and all these people just looking at us like with our shoes off, and just like in the middle, this is NYU campus, so it's like in the middle of I forgot what street, but it's Houston and whatever, not Bleecker, but Houston
in the middle of that's the most urban you can get right there.
Yes, it's like Houston. some street, whatever.
Right.
But that urban farm is no longer there. But
Really, I didn't know that.
we were in the middle of it all, basically kind of in the middle of New York, just doing whatever we were doing. And so people were just looking at these two Black women with afros, just like doing stuff. And we didn't really know exactly what we were doing all the way, because we were still learning different things. We were learning, and like I wouldn't say we were experts, but everyone learns. My grandmother still, in her mind, maybe she was still learning, because
Right.
when you're doing agriculture, you can't do the same thing all the time, because you have, it's the ecosystem. You have to go with the ecosystem. So,
Right.
and the environment. So you have to sometimes switch things up or understand, oh, there's this, there's that. So, but us being there, I was just like, okay, this is my space. And then me and my friend Whitney being a community with these things and being able to talk about these things together, was also really positive. And from that, we both sprang our different networks, and then those networks definitely came together as this became what we do, and became a part of our decolonization process, and a part of how we moved in the world, and a part of us learning how she does more fashion and I do more food, but also learning from each other how these really intersect. Because I didn't necessarily, I understood in when it came on to labor and people who work in the fashion industry. I understand that in the forced labor, and the unfair labor systems within the fashion industry, but I didn't understand it in terms of agriculture. And again, me also bringing my knowledge of what's going on with agriculture and food to my friends in my network in sustainability. So like we're teaching each other. So it's just like a really positive web of learning, relearning, unlearning, and connecting with each other on all of these issues. And now we have a really wonderful network that's New York to the world, Brooklyn, Brooklyn to the world, out to the world, New York City out to the world, that's doing this work. And then a lot of the people that were doing this work were engaged with this work, and we call ourselves Sisters in Sustainability. It is, I don't even know if we have a TM or anything like that, but whatever. A lot of them.
What's the name of it again? So we can actually put it up on
Sustainability.
Okay.
Yeah, but we're just like a collective of Black women, Black identified women,
yeah,
women
you have so much knowledge. I wanted to go back. So you also said your friend Whitney, she's also doing something as well. Is she part of the collective, or is that?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, like
and there's a whole network of us that are just like doing this work. And it's and we and there's also different levels to what we're doing and how we're doing it. A lot of us are well known in the field, and a lot of us are important contributors to the field, but never put ourselves out there at the forefront. And so it's also just a good network to have, because like with me, I'm just entering the forefront, even though I have a wealth of knowledge in this space, but I'm just putting myself in the forefront, like literally March, that I started to engage with like public facing. Before that, I did not engage public facing, not always and not all the time. If I was invited to something, I was invited to something, but I didn't put my ideas out on the web. I didn't write and publish it out, in like Medium or any other publications. I was not public facing at all.
One question. So to all the young ladies that are actually listening, and entrepreneurs that are starting, like what was that shift for you? Like what changed? Why March? Why now? Why 2021?
The pandemic. So that's one thing where within the pandemic setting, it allowed everybody to, and it's horrible, but allowed everyone to be in the same space of alertness that I have been in for 20 years.
I actually feel you on that. I'm like,
I was like,
welcome.
I
You
was
know,
15, like
you.
we all gonna die. Like white supremacy is killing us, capitalism is starving us,
oh,
and
now
now
it's
everybody's on that
affecting me.
page.
Oh yeah,
So
exactly.
you know what I mean?
I
Thank
see.
thank the spirit, thank the
Right.
universe, because it was a very lonely space, and it's I would have friends that would, and I would make friends in a network of people that understood that type of language and that had that type of understanding, but there's different processes of like development to even start thinking about these things.
Precisely. Yeah.
So
it's not just
um,
immediate,
it's
for
not
sure.
immediate. Something
Right.
needs to happen personally. Also, things you need to be engaged with reading people. You need to be wrong, and then and then figure out what parts are right and what parts are wrong about how you're thinking, and what parts are you attempting to survive these systems, so you're acculturating, and what parts were you made to assimilate to survive. Like
Code
you have to
switching.
really
Shout out to all of that. Yeah.
you have to understand those levels. And
Yeah.
I'm glad I have like a network of people that have been, I've cultivated a network, and kind of, connected myself with people like, we're friends now. They're like, what? It's like, we're friends, just deal with it. Like, but at the end of the day, they're just too like, I know we're friends, like, because I can't talk about this stuff with anybody
With
else.
anyone else. Yeah.
But I think everybody became on a similar page of urgency that I, in some way, kind of have always been on. And the conversations that I always wanted to have, as I said, about white supremacy, I was 15. Now people were willing to engage in those conversations. And I think people actually started to understand the language I was speaking, when before it was like what is it, the Muppet? Not the Muppets, Charlie Brown, where I was the adult, wah, 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 wah. And no, everyone was just like, I don't understand what you're talking about. It was
They didn't
that
want
moment
to.
where,
Yeah.
well, it was they couldn't, because it was just not there yet. And it's okay, because it's okay, because there were points in my life where I wasn't necessarily there.
I see what you're
And
saying. It wasn't there for
so
them, but it's always been present. Like, let's not deny, like you said, Jamaica's not been going through this anytime new. The colorism has been going since before your grandmother, and things that she
yeah,
experienced as a child and her grandmother. I've been thinking about this in such a like layered type of way. Like, this is a much larger problem than we're trying to fix right now. But what I wanted to highlight is what you're saying is that sense of community that you've built has actually made me more, not necessarily like I needed a crowd to finally do it, because I've been on this for a while too, whether it be, which we're going to touch on, which veganism and vegetarian stuff. I've been on that for a long time. But just finding those like-minded individuals that seem to be so far and scattered across has become a lot more accessible, at least for me. Like, I don't know how I would have met you if I didn't take a step out to do something different for, the community or whatever it is. So I encourage you to keep going, because you're going to build up such a unit. So I appreciate all of your sisterhood and stuff. So I know this is going to go through their networks as well. So I appreciate them as well. So yeah.
No, definitely. It's a very strong network, and and moving in particular types of ways, and contributing in particular types of ways, and teaching and learning and connecting with each other. But yeah, it really was the pandemic that made me, well, it was particularly my first article that I wrote on Medium, which was about health, wellness. And I think what I'm going to do is, in April, it came out like April 4th. So I'm going to work on that article and revamp it as a kind of like, I wrote this and this is how I'm changing, like a note, Arthur's note, that this is being changed and updated based upon like a year anniversary of the pandemic. But I was literally having family members, because my mom is like the one who's the healer in the family. So we were having family members call us saying that they may or may not have COVID. And we had to tell them like how to survive this, because of just things that we knew about just natural remedies and natural, like African, indigenous African, actual indigenous Caribbean, like spaces that we like, healing spaces that we understand.
Yeah.
And my sister is like inclined with like science and some of the knowledge around that, like scientific knowledge, like don't take this, you need to take zinc with this and blah, 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 blah. And some of the technical. And then I'm very inclined with the types of food and how to convey and how to also convey things about healing without it being an indictment on people, without it being saying that how you live is bad, so you need to transform your life. And you know how it is. You know how
I do. I listen.
about
I mean,
shame. It's about creating shame without creating shame, but
Yeah.
about saying like, if you have COVID and you're really struggling, with the symptoms, these are things that top 10 things that you should do to kind of like to allow you to alleviate these symptoms.
Right.
And it's really like, eat oranges and mangoes. It's things that's somewhat accessible to people. But I also wrote an article attached to it, like saying that accessibility for all these things, all these 10 things are going to be difficult for a lot of people. Me saying drink lots of water may be difficult for a lot of people.
Right.
So it's really positioned like I was very forthright and forward with this is do what you can from this list. And this is how my grandmother, who is a healer and a nurse and someone, horticulturalist and all this kind of, and a farmer, this is how she would do it. And this is what my mom remembers about how my grandmother healed. And this is what she does to heal us. And I trust this. And it's very simple. It's like, lower gluten or don't eat gluten at all if you're sick. It's just like, don't eat meat when you're sick. I mean, that's just like general things that my family always had rules about, like don't eat meat when you're sick. And that may be just attached to, how meat was eaten anyways in my family, just like in Jamaica where, you ate meat fresh, you know what I mean? And there was not very much refrigeration. So, and you transitioned non-human animals in a particular type of way. So you can't really trust meat in these spaces anyways. So it's just kind of like, and that's how we've always navigated. So so it was COVID that said that I needed to get my, this information out there, because this was information that we were sending to my family members. And I'm talking about like my family of I say that I'm Jamaican. That means like most of us are essential workers in some framework. Like most of us, like my family has filled those roles, and many Caribbean American people have filled those roles.
Right.
Many
That's what I was
Caribbean
going to
immigrants
say.
fill those roles.
I'm in New York, so I know most
So you
of all.
understand, people were still working.
Precisely. And not only that, I just the transition, not to sorry interrupt you, but the transition from the ideas of colonialism from where we were originally, like it was originally just a healer. And if you go back to some African traditions, witch doctors or medicine men and all these herbs and stuff that I was taking during 2020, I definitely was going to the Jamaicans and getting all sorts of tonics and all sorts of whatever I need. They have what you need, whether it be sea moss, which is going through a bit of a shortage. So I wanted to position the question like partially like, how have you changed your diet? What do you suggest for people? And kind of like what projects have you been working on directly? It's kind of a multifaceted question, but I know you'll get to all of it.
But I had to, just seeing also the politics when I first wrote the first article that I wrote. When I wrote it, I was not engulfed in the politics of health and wellness. I did know that something is wrong here. I did know that accessibility was an issue. I did know that cultural appropriation was a big issue, because that's probably why we have a sea moss shortage, is because, certain people want sea moss. And Whole Foods probably now has sea moss available at a Whole Foods near you, Whole Foods market near you, and it's not, and it's not, say, cultivated by, a small marketplace. It's now, a whole situation.
Right.
But I knew that those things existed, so I want to speak directly to my community, and get certain information in my community, which was simple, 10 things like, ginger tea, blend the ginger, boil the ginger, drink the ginger, like, you know what I mean? Those types of things.
Simple.
Yeah, yeah. It's pretty accessible in a particular type of way, like, or even just lemon. Squeeze the lemon, boil it as tea, and then drink it like hot lemon or warm lemon, to break apart mucus. Just like somewhat general things that the CDC or in the the NHS or anything like that can't really give that information, because they're just telling people to wash their hands, which I maybe understand, but at the same time, I said if they can't give that type of information of just up your fruits and vegetables, and lower meat and gluten intake, and dairy intake while you're sick, because this is about mucus buildup. um
That's true. That's what this is about.
they can't do that, and a lot
Like
of people don't.
metals, all that stuff.
I
Yeah, for sure.
I had to learn that too. I had to learn when I was going through, a transition in the way my body was working 8 years ago. I had to learn that, what gluten was, because I didn't really understand what gluten was 8 years ago, and I didn't even understand it as a colonial food, as that's wheat coming from Europe, and I don't. My family, we're not eating wheat. We're eating, yeah, we're eating
I mean, generationally,
cassava,
it's not in.
banana.
Yeah, it's not even.
We're eating a lot of
Yeah,
starch. We're eating starches, but they're mostly gluten free. So, and if you have bread, it's hard-dough bread, and it's like, ooh, treat. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not something that's consumed daily or this, that, and the other. It's a treat.
right.
Most of the food that you're eating is gluten free. So I had to also understand that, and that's why parts of my just like health was, um, there was no equilibrium or balance in it, because I was partaking in certain type of colonial foods that my family just wasn't eating in a particular type of way. Even meat, um, um, uh, consuming, and I was talking to Caleb about this earlier, consuming non-human animals in a particular type of way. My family, I the reason why I went, all the way, vegan or plant-based, and really attracted all animal products from my diet was, I was thinking about the body count. I was just like, well, your body count is, and I think when I did I can't remember the calculation, but I think my calculation was like 30,000 non-human animals. It was
Big or
something like really
small.
like, wow, you murderer.
I think it's just like, if you go back
I
to like the fertile land, would you have hunted all of that yourself? Would you have gone out
That's
and
what
killed that many
I'm
chickens? I don't
saying.
think so. I don't. Yeah.
That's a whole nother space to be in.
Mhm.
Because it fits with all of the ancestors that I had, they starting particularly with my grandmother, how they didn't consume 30,000 beings. They didn't do that like all my ancestors. I can't tell you what what the English Scottish. I'm talking about the African, African indigenous and Asian ones. They did not consume all those.
Right.
They just there's no way. So I consumed maybe like 1,000 years of what they consumed with my
It's
30,000 beings, and I was just like, that's crazy. That's what really made me like, that's crazy. I was like, that's why, like, your DNA can't even handle this. Like, on a scientific level, can your
right.
DNA even handle this?
Right.
Like, no, a cellular level, you can't handle this. Spiritual level, can you handle this? Because you don't even know what
Right.
happened to any of those things. Like,
Right.
you don't know
All
the
the
type of
the
torture and torment that you're ingesting. Can you
the
handle
fear
this? And I was like,
killing,
nope.
all of that stuff. Yeah, it's a horrible
And then
process. We have
also,
no idea where this is coming from, for sure. Yeah.
well, I have to think about this too. Well, your grandmother could look a goat in the eye that she raised and said, it's your time to go. And I'm going to transition you. And I love you. And I thank you for what you've done for my family. but it's your time to go. And she transitioned that animal. Could I do that? Like, I'm weak. I can't do that.
Like, it's a lot easier to just be like, $10 for some chicken. You know, you're not thinking about all the stuff it's gone through. Like, yeah, it's insane to think about like that.
My spirit is not strong enough to even like go into some of the indigenous spiritual or just the practices of transitioning or sacrificing animals to consume them. Like there's like a space in indigenous practices that you need to be in to be able to do that. And I am not even there. Like I can't even fish because I'd be like, I can't fish. So it's like if I can hunt, but hunt in like the indigenous practices type ways, if I can transition animals indigenous practice type ways, if I can do that, then then I can do that, but I can't. So it's just like I have no right to then ingest beings that I can't even look in the eye and kill. That's my thing. Like, if you're gonna be a gangster, be all the way.
Be all the way gangster, right? Do the ritual prayer, pray over it, but, just like Shabbos. I mean, halal food. I mean, there are some religions that do pray over their food still.
But it's also their associations now with colonialism and capitalism is also moving them into certain spaces where they have to transition animals at like a high speed rate where it wasn't like that before.
Hail Marys, just like
now it's like we have to do this because and it has to be fast, and because of the way that Western eating habits, which is very meat based, is moving. It's transitioning people to eat meat in ways that they have not, in the quantities that they have not generations before. So that's also problematic, where there are, say, cultures that do some of those things currently, but they still are associated with these with systems of capitalism and white supremacy within the food system.
Right. For sure. I mean, I think Caleb had put the banner up really quickly, but I don't think veganism equals the crisis. I think that it's kind of trying to reverse the crisis a bit. In a sense,
tell you. Go ahead. Sure. I was telling Caleb earlier. Go ahead. Say no. This is important. This is really important.
For sure. I mean, what the potential crisis is comes from a lot of different aspects of just the immorality of what you just described, the immorality of not really taking into account other life and beings. That's all this is about. And when you come from the abundancy mindset that a lot of our ancestors have come from, whether just because of the sun being closer to the equator or wherever Pangea left us after everything started to come about, in more European places, particularly around like during the Ice Age, there was a lot more like crazy food shortages because of the way that they were cultivating the food. They would fish and like destroy the ponds like with too much and stuff. I've heard all types of theories. So they had to venture out into more vegetation because there wasn't enough there. I mean, even leading to some sorts of cannibalism and all sorts of other crazy stuff that was going on. So I think that there are different ways, even because a lot of people like to, I do have indigenous, like Native Americans, like, like the ones that are here that they like to proclaim are the biggest parts of indigenous America. But if you look at America as a whole, even those that are indigenous Jamaican with their ancestry from Africa and all sorts of other places have been here for like the longest, like before Columbus, even way before that. So if you just think about, like you said, the enriching of the environment and how abundant we come from, as a people, we've been able to share that. And when you have a scarcity mindset is when you start to create that in other aspects. That fear is then perpetuates and creates more things. And now, like you said, we're almost consuming that fear, even with the way we eat. So I'm just curious, like, do you have like a checklist of what you eat? Like, what keeps you happy? Like, I tend to eat, like you said, very bright foods, tons of water. But I would love to have that like checklist that you could probably share with people. Do you have like a website for that, or is it on your Instagram?
I mean, maybe I need to have a website for that. I have Plant-Based is Political, and I actually have another another IG page called Faddish Veganish. But I've been kind of but I've been lazy about Faddish Veganish, but I need to put that up. But the reason why, as I'm coming into more political vegan spaces, that's where the crisis is. It's not necessarily in the kind of what veganism projects, or what we even the personal reasons why we move into that space. It's not that. It's the collective movement spaces or mainstream movement spaces that have become dangerous to not only veganism as progressive, but then veganism as connecting with other social justice and activist movements, sustainability, human rights, and this kind of non-human animals only type of animal activism. So it's not necessarily just veganism as the personal kind of transformation of not, I'm not going to consume animals, and I'm not going to partake in particular type of, non-human things that are associated with non-human animal, not only consumption, but the use of non-human animals. But it's a little bit, what I've learned is just by being in this space, by starting plant-based is political and engulfing myself in this space, that there's a lot going on. Even the thing like white veganism and white supremacy not being really sift out, because veganism is, like any other social justice type of movement, anti-oppressive movement. It's like feminism. It's similar to environmentalism. It's within those spaces, but those spaces are very much,
colonized
spaces, colonized spaces. Like, they don't really talk about capitalism. There's a lot of things that aren't necessarily like, it's project a lot of trauma porn. There's just there's a lot of issues. So to kind of, and then Black people are moving, particularly Black people are moving within vegan spaces differently, especially if you're from certain areas where, like, say, DC, New York, Boston, or just even just different areas around the United States, say, and then in Europe, where there are cultures that have been vegan for, as a decolonization tool for decolonization, as a tool for anti-capitalism, like Rastafarian people, an tool for projecting anti-colonialism, all of that. That's a different space to then be plant-based and be in vegan spaces. That's just a different whole viewpoint to be in, rather than, I saw a documentary and I saw a pig's throat get cut, and now I can't, I understand
that.
now.
I don't think I can right now.
That's one thing, but to go into but that's kind of a trauma attached to, I'm not going to do this now, but will it take you every year to see a pig's cut through, throat cut, for you to be like, oh, okay, now I know why I'm still vegan? No, it needs to be rooted in like decolonization, needs to be rooted in white unsettling in these spaces. It needs to be rooted in total liberation, needs to be rooted in anti-capitalism. And it has to be rooted in what Indigenous people have been fighting for. Many Indigenous people are plant-based, and they're being forced to acculturate to Western patterns and norms. And a lot of those Western patterns and norms are about consumption of meat, dairy, and gluten. So, and it's just kind of like, the da 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 diet.
Right. We don't want to lose our sponsorship. Like, no, we're not sponsored by McDonald's. It's fine.
But the fact that we know what that is tells us how the assimilation process, the acculturation process have, has even engulfed.
Do you know how to
have an understanding.
Coconut? Do you know how to do all that stuff? But I bet you know the jingle to McDonald's. Like, that's just the thing. Like, can you transition a spirit and actually make sure that you're doing it correctly and that you're not eating its negativity? Do you know how to, like, actually take time and let the the earth cultivate itself after maybe farming it too much, not overusing it, like little stuff like that, like you said, have been passed down. And they're like, I love that word that used to be called like savage. And, I know you said that you felt poor. And I think that is so interesting that you described that after you just said, my grandmother was abundant. I didn't feel poor at all. And you felt that you couldn't go back home. Of all places, they're going to the abundance and they've got you in the scarcity. So it's like this,
Exactly.
this switch that makes you feel. And I felt that in all spaces. I mean, even just amongst our own people, I feel like that scarcity mindset is perpetuated. I don't know how many in your circle. I mean, obviously your circle has been probably created, but originally in my circle, before I kind of went on this path of vegetarian or whatever I was doing, just to change the paradigm of what people are experiencing, i.e., with my name being Arabic, with all sorts of things coming from that, my own ancestry, and just going through those spaces. But I realized that a lot of people, like you said, don't really want to change or have to experience, God forbid, and God rest his soul, like a knee on a neck for this global change to change about and like put everyone together. And I don't think that it needs to be continued to reiterated that we have to continue to see leaders fall for us to stand up. I'm kind of tired of that aspect. Like we have to like more celebrate our gains rather than every time we find a loss, So
And I think the thing is that there's a lot going on, and we have to understand that these systems are way bigger than we understand and know. So I don't blame anybody for being assimilated or acculturating. Because there's a level of, I'm not fully decolonized. If I was, I'd be, F this computer. Like, bye. Like, I would just be gone. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I still am acculturated and assimilated to this space at some level to survive this specific circumstance that I'm in. And then I have to also understand that I'm also a messenger for my, ancestors and different colonized people around the world who are still struggling in the same ways that my ancestors did 150 years ago. My ancestors in 1865 orchestrated one of the largest rebellions in Jamaican history.
No
and
way.
Literally, this is like
some facts. What's that
these
about?
are like my people. Like these are my people. Like I looked on my grandma's obituary and the flyer or the leaflet for her funeral recently, like 10 years ago. And I saw the name Bogle, and I was like, as the person who was the preacher that was for the funeral, the pastor for the funeral's last name Bogle. And I was like Paul Bogle, like Jamaican hero, like burned the courthouse and killed mad British people for our
that
land and sovereignty.
Was
and
it?
she was just like, yes, of course. She was like, those are our people. Like,
no
and
way.
So it's a whole different space that you come from when that's not only when that's your lineage, but then when you feel like it's your responsibility that you're here so that you can tell that story in the way that it needs to be told, that you're not just here to be here, but you're here with a particular tool. Like I know how to speak this language that my ancestors, even if they did know how to speak, weren't taken seriously. I know how to access certain spaces and places and certain venues and certain technology that my ancestors can't, and that there's people also in the world today that don't have the type of platforms that I can create or am also invited to. And then I need to then understand my kin story just around the world so that I can project that story to the world unadulterated and very real and very raw. Because I really don't, care, not to say I don't care about money, but I just am not really in that space of like trying to be a millionaire. Like if I get paid, if I don't get paid, I'm still going to talk. So it's a different space to be in, and just to know your role the reason why I'm here and the reason why I'm able to talk and the reason why I have, these platforms and I'm able to spread ideas and connect and spread other people's ideas as well that I've learned. That's the purpose that I hold. It's not so that I can be what I want to be. It's that I can be what they need me to be. Because I've had many times where I was just like, I don't want to be here. Why am I around in these institutions? They don't even want me here. I don't, not that I don't belong here, but I know what they know, but I don't want to be here. And I really had to think that I'm not here for me. I'm here for my ancestors, and I'm here for my kin who are very much connected to what my ancestors were fighting for, and they're still fighting. There are Morant Bay rebellions happening every single day. Right. And I have to be around and be aware of what is happening so that I can, project and be a part of that revolutionary spirit and tell these stories and tell these narratives and speak truth and destabilize and dismantle any of these crazy white supremacist narratives at any point in space that I can. One thing I do want to say is that when it comes on to like more morality and immorality, when I think about food and veganism and all that kind of stuff, or about any kind of conscientious consumption or being, I don't really go in the space of immorality, because those have been used so much to just not only destabilize, it's just rooted in anti-Blackness and white supremacy.
Fair enough.
Shame is, and so that we use language because it makes sense, but when it comes on to like as a concept, not just as a word and saying, but as a concept and ways of moving people to conscientious ways of being. I move in the way of just accessibility and understanding and teaching and and connecting and reconnecting. And what I do when it comes on, because I think the realness is I already said that I have 30,000 non-human animals under my belt that literally been slaughtered. I have no right to then say, shame on you, because I'm not doing something right now in my particular point in life. I have no right at all. You know what I mean?
No shame culture. I got you.
Yeah, I've done. Oh, say it again.
I said no shame culture. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Because I just don't have that right. I've done my dirt. I've been in these spaces. I've been in a lot of places that a lot of people have been. When where you just get used to something, and it's accessible, and it's something that it's a way that a particular people in your family may have done it, and it's also is an indulgence that also helps move along, because a lot of people connect food with traditions and spaces. So understanding that is important. But I think when it comes on to shame and immorality, I move out of that space, because as I'm moving through veganism as like a politic, veganism as an anti-oppressive social justice movement, what I see white veganism do is speak about immorality and shame a lot. And that's how, that's their point of moving people towards veganism. And a lot of that is targeted, shame and immorality is targeted mostly at Black, brown, indigenous people, and saying, why do you eat like this? And why do you do this? And why, targeting them and targeting our communities, really. Instead of seeing these pathologies as a part of colonialism and capitalism. And it's like,
get into real estate.
And it's like, do we want to talk about where these things come from, and how people had to acculturate to a certain, like, if you weren't eating certain foods, you were looked at crazy. Like, a lot of times Black people were looked at crazy for eating collards, for eating an abundance of fruits and vegetables. like just like not eating. Basically, if you weren't eating carrots, peas, and broccoli, they saw you as a savage. Really,
How funny.
those three vegetables, like, oh, those were maybe asparagus, maybe celery. You could eat those vegetables. But if you were eating dark leafy greens, if you were eating mustard greens, if you were eating collards, if you were eating chards, if you were eating all those, they looked at you like, why are you eating? If you were eating dandelion greens, a lot of times dandelion was
So
a
good for you.
weed.
Yeah. Good for your eyes, all sorts of stuff, for sure.
And we were like, oh, you mean a vegetable and a tea? Like, that's a healing tea, and that's a vegetable that, dandelion greens, that's what you eat. Like, so it's very, a lot of the foods that are now being projected in this health and wellness space and the superfoods a lot of them are Black, brown, indigenous. Indigenous, just foods that people would just eat, just generally just eat. And there was a lot of it. So it never was meat centered anyways. The sides were just as important as what was seen as the main, which was maybe the meat dish. And if the main was the meat dish, it was usually during a holiday or special convening or something like that, celebration. It wasn't something that you did like every day. It just couldn't have been. So
it's unsustainable.
Yes. And then you couldn't really trust what you were getting. So, in general, a lot of Black people, not until like really the 60s and 70s, particularly with desegregation, were they really going to mainstream places anyways.
Sure.
So there was a way that white people were navigating that Black people couldn't because of segregation. And whether if it was by law or by practice that Black people don't go to this kind of store because they're not wanted there. They're going to be followed in the store, this and the other. So there were smaller places or gardens or things that people would do. I'm talking about specifically like urban spaces and areas. Ways to access certain foods. And then sometimes foods just weren't in the mainstream supermarkets because they were seen as Black foods, or seen as there weren't going to be dandelion greens, collard greens, and mustard greens in a mainstream supermarket. I'm only seeing that in the past 10 years.
Yeah. Even probably shorter than that. I mean, there's a reason why Whole Foods has taken up so much space in these type of communities, and how that basically ends up getting bought by Amazon. So it has a lot of mixy stuff that, like you said, there's like a trend that's happening. It's obviously been talked about for years. It's been our families for years, but now it's being, again, appropriated. And then also they're charging more for it than what it's actually been bought. So that's like the whole other thing. So now it's not only a social thing, but a financial thing. It's a lot. It's a resource. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize that water is becoming a bit of a resource issue in Asia and a bunch of other places. So these things that we get so readily don't necessarily feel like they're going to be here forever. So those little toilet paper scares and all that little stuff, it means nothing when you don't really know how to farm and have a backyard where you can kind of go back to your greens. So my question is, I'm also in New York talking all that stuff, and I don't have a farm. So I'm wondering how you navigating in that space. And like, there's been a mass exodus from New York and a lot of the biggest cities. And we've been talking about decolonizing our bodies and just being around certain vibrations. But there's a lot of theories that I've also brought up with Caleb, I'm sure you'll remember, with 5G and just being around a bunch of people, and how that coronavirus has a lot to do with just being around a bunch of negative energy and phlegm. It's just a lot of stuff that's involved. So would you ever take a leap from, like you said, just like, F the computer? Or I know some people in Costa Rica that are doing it, but
I think that is there's a home going or a home finding or home seeking type of voyage. A lot of people, particularly Black and brown people, are doing. But I think what we have to be careful of is really moving ourselves away from some of the colonial things that are going on. Let's say in Puerto Rico, I'm, a Spanish speaker, not very good right now because I just haven't been able to travel and connect and all this kind of stuff. But I'm a Spanish speaker, so I would love to say go to Puerto Rico and reacclimate my life and connect with some friends I have over there and all of that stuff. But there's a whole issue with these crypto coin people, cryptocurrency people, and the tax kind of evasion type people, and the billionaires and the millionaires that are going to Puerto Rico, as a tax haven. And as I want to matriate and connect with the struggles within the spaces of the Caribbean and find my community there, I want to be careful that I'm not moving in spaces that are very colonial. So there's a two-pronged situation there where, yes, the diaspora, however it looks like, even if it's home seeking, even if it's the African diaspora moving back to the continental Africa in some sort of way,
like Ghana and some other places, for sure. Yeah,
needs to understand the coloniality of going back. And if you're going to go back, you can't go back within the same context. You have to really go back thinking that you're going to connect with communities that are moving in a particular type of way. And I think sustainability has been the best way to kind of counter coloniality. But it has to be sustainability rooted in Black, Brown, Indigenous in the politics of regeneration and all that kind of stuff. It can't be sustainability like, yay, metal straws, we're saving the earth. It has to be like, sustainability in connecting with the issues that the people who live there, the indigenous people who live there, indigenous, if it's 500 years, 300 years, or indigenous, where it's millennials, what they're dealing with, and connecting and contributing and showing your worth. And that's also hard, having to contribute and show your worth and not necessarily be, not be exalted as somebody that's important, and really try to put yourself in the background and focus on supporting and amplifying the needs and the leaders in those spaces. That's also important in any type of home-seeking, home-going type of situation. But, a part of my, the most basic part of my decolonization is also the process of decolonization, because it's not done. It's a never-ending process. It's very much unfinished. Is just watching House Hunters International and being like, sorry, no, I'm gonna say this, no offense, Caleb, but these basic ass white people
no, you're totally fine.
with $3.45 going to Costa Rica, like, going to Mexico, and I'm like, you have $3.45. How are you doing this?
Right. But I never got that either, but yeah.
But if you
see the indigenous folk walking by these homes. I'm sorry.
To be honest, I feel like House Hunters makes like anyone who lives or has ever paid rent in New York just upset. Like, because you're like, they're like, I have $20,000. Let me get this house. And you're like, where are you living? But it's, other places have other spaces. So, but particularly when I see House Hunters International, I'm seeing people go to the Caribbean, Jamaica, all these different island spaces, Central America, even Latin America. And I'm just like, and they don't have much more than I have. And for one, and I'm just like, it makes it, for one, like, I can do this. But then it makes it like, well, how many of these people exist, and are they all there? And how is this changing the dynamic of that space? How are these? I know these people are not sustainable. They literally are, they want to live how they want to live.
Look at the
however
houses.
However they're living in Iowa, they want to live in Costa Rica. So they want the certain things that they have accessible in Iowa. they want to be accessible in Costa Rica. Certain things they have
Right.
accessible in Oklahoma or Mississippi, wherever they're coming from. They want it to that same level of accessibility, that same level of capitalist markets and all this kind of stuff. So I'm just like, and then also some of these people are coming there and being like, well, I want a small business and to get into the health and wellness field, and then to bring more people there to then, you know, as a way of like tourism and ecotourism, because it's, you know, it's flashy now. So it's like, but it's not necessarily, yeah, it's not based in any type of community building. It's kind of just like very much parasitic and trying to take someone else's practices and acculturate them to then legitimize yourself in that space and then project some authority to these other people who are, you know, willing to pay top dollar in the US to then experience your enlightened life in wherever space. You have those people, they exist, and they exist in very large numbers within the context of the Caribbean, Latin America, and Central America. And just watching, you know, House Hunters International, that really just, you know, allowed me to see that there's a bigger problem than me wanting to go back home, because home is literally very different, and that there's other people that are seeking my home to make it their home in a particular type of colonized way, in a very much a tourist way, and also in a white savior type way.
This is like a very heavy topic, because I think that it not only has to do with, just like you said, just white capitalism and all these other things that we're accessing. I think that it's kind of like you're challenging even our BIPOC community as well, and all our indigenous folk that may now have a little bit of wealth. And I'm curious to see how we contribute to neo-capitalism in that aspect, neo-colonialism in that way. So how would you define like us being able to grow and finding that abundance without just doing the same thing that we were already trained to do through trauma? I mean, you're a history buff, and you know that history will repeat itself. But I see a lot of Black capitalists, even in Atlanta, Georgia, and all these type of places. No shade to them, but I've seen we're almost perpetuating the same colonialism that we started, and we're doing it to our own people all over again. Just those that are a little more impoverished, or didn't have enough credit to buy these homes, you know? So.
I think, you know, the thing is that representation matters. When I say that, for capitalism, representation matters. For neocolonialism, representation matters. They love it when they see Black, Brown, Indigenous spaces act in the way of the colonizer. They, you know, like they thrive off of that. And then also, we have to understand that our images, Black, Brown, Indigenous people, our images have been used to sell capitalism to the world. Right. If you even, and my sister Nikki Sanchez, we talk about this when it comes on the cultural appropriation and the appropriation of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and the intersection of Black, Brown, Indigenous, just the images. You have the chiefs and the Redskins, you know, like, does capitalism really need to do that? Or Uncle Ben? But they do. Aunt Jemima, like,
did they change that? I think
they just changed it.
Yeah.
But that's how they've been doing it for the past 500 years, since they started trying to market this quote unquote new world to you know, the money people
of Europe, the European interests specifically. Yes. Right, exactly.
Yeah, you know, yeah. So when they were trying to do that, they had to project the exotic, and they've been projecting the exotic. They've been projecting the savage to sell capitalism for 500 years. So to stop that, it's very difficult for just people, especially in the ways that I always say capitalism is not smart. It's just repetitive and redundant. They're persistent. It's not like they're not going to do anything new. They're going to do the same thing over and over, but they'll just, you know, kind of do it in a particular type of way that, like a small little tweak, like the smallest tweak. But the smallest tweak is an important tweak. So I think because we don't really understand how much, even with blackface and even like soap companies and just all of that, cigarette companies use Black imagery
Billy
and
D.
Black, brown, indigenous imagery to sell everything.
Right.
And it's very much interwoven and collapsed with capitalism, is them allowing us to then be a part of those systems, is that small tweak, is that representation matters tweak. So now, the person that you have to worry about looks like you, but that's not like that. That's also nothing new, because there was always people that they found, or they held hostage, or they had a carrot or stick, or however, to translate and to be a part of some of their very dangerous and destabilizing type systems, and we have names for them within our community. Tarik, those types of people, the names we have for them. All types of names. But and I don't think I don't necessarily take those people. I take them seriously. I know they're dangerous, but I don't take them seriously in thinking that I understand the way they move and why they move that way.
Right.
And I understand that this is nothing new. It's just a minor tweak. Representation matters. And when we hear that, we should always be wary. When someone says representation matters, it's like, okay, we're bombing Syria. Representation still matters? Like, or not where. I never connect myself to the nation. They're bombing Syria. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Representation does not matter. To me, at least, what matters to me is a seismic shift of the systems that we currently live under, and a dismantling, destabilization of those systems. It's not representation. It's never been representation. Some of the most violent people towards me have been representatives of the state that look like me. So I never really thought, oh, this person's Black, safety. It's like, this person's Black. This person's Black, brown, indigenous. Well, who do they work for? You know what I mean? You're like who are they working with?
What did you eat today?
You have to have just a level of discernment.
I don't know. We got to work on that one. No, I feel you. Just to bring it full circle. I mean, I feel like we should definitely have you on again, because this is awesome. Like, I think that you said some phenomenal things about cultivating and co-collaborating, and also just like you said, just kind of creating the soil around you, making sure that environment is perfect, whether it be spiritual or whatever it is. And that will actually push you forward to do such great things like you're doing. So yeah, just tell people how to join in your products, how they can reach out to you. I actually saw that you had your own, that you were talking to some people on your Instagram as well, right?
Yeah, so I have a few Instagrams. I have 3 at Almost Dr. Lisa Betty, and that's where most of my just my writing and content like that, and then sharing different people in my network, their work, and I think that's just kind of deep rooted in knowledge and connection. So I like that one. Plant-based is political is some of my work on veganism. Oh, there's a dots. Plant-based dot is dot political. Sorry, I did that once. I was like, wait, that's not it. Tagged myself on something. I was like, what is my site? Anyways, yeah.
Shout out to your nomination for the historian stuff as well. We didn't get a chance to talk about that, but definitely you could share some of that as well. But plant-based is political.
At Faddish Veganish. It's somewhat, it's somewhat political.
But that one for Caleb, right? Caleb, you got that one?
I'm gonna need you to sound that out.
Faddish, so Fattish, Veganish, Veganish. So with Faddish Veganish, it's really about, because I was noticing, like, I was moving in a particular type of way, even when I didn't really understand how I was moving. Like I wasn't in certain spaces all the way, or like politically or like in community all the way. So with Faddish Veganish, it's just I saw that veganism and plant-based eating was sold as some kind of like health and wellness, like, get diet, lose 50 pounds real quick scheme in a lot of spaces. And what I really wanted to connect with was the Black, brown, indigenous foods that I grew up with and ate that were very much plant-based and very much full fat. Like I didn't understand. No, like the vegan food I'm eating is plant-based, it's whole, and it's very much connected to the traditional foods that I've always eaten. So it's not a situation where and it's not necessarily processed either, but processed food, because I'm living in this space. I'm not like, oh, don't eat processed food ever. Like there's a level of I'll say accessibility that you need sometimes when you're living in this context where it's like, I got to use the canned beans because I can't soak beans overnight right now. Like chill on that. or I feel for a burger. Like I remember I ate a burger a long time ago. I feel for that same burger, but with the ingredients that I like. And the ingredients that I have in my kitchen right now. Like I eat a lot of falafel and things like that. So chickpea and things like that. So yeah, it's like saying Faddish Veganish, where it's like trying to also decolonize that type of way of thinking about veganism and plant-based in terms of just like a piece of lettuce, where it's like, no, we're gonna eat. You
don't understand how many jokes I get a day about that one.
We're gonna eat ackee yam, cocoa yam. We're gonna have kalaloo. We're gonna have we're gonna have ackee. We're gonna have avocado, pear. We're gonna have all of that, and it's gonna make you full. And and we're gonna have rundown, and it's coconut oil, coconut milk. All of that stuff, because it's coming from a different type of tradition of plant-based eating that is based on Black, brown, indigenous ways of being. So that my family
trying
was
to get
really,
a stick. Let's get these vegans stick out here.
And all of the Black vegans and plant-based eaters that I know are not, small or skinny or any type of we have frames, and not to say that people who aren't eating a particular type, but we're not focused necessarily on being in a certain standard. It's more about connecting with the foods that are indigenous to us, and the foods that we grew up with, and the food tradition that we feel like we're losing as we're trying to acculturate to this space. So that's what it's really connected to, because I'm, making yam. I don't do that. I even learning how to like make beans. I had to ask my mom when I first because I never made beans. She's the one who made beans. And when I moved away from home, I had to ask my mom, how do we really make beans? Like, I didn't really know. And then me traveling to other places, like Cuba and other places, and having to feed myself and be like, let me really learn how to make beans, because I can't afford to eat all the time outside. Is just like,
saved a lot of money for sure.
And I make beans in the Afro-Indigenous ways that how my ancestors made beans, and I know how to make beans. And it's not easy. It's not that's a skill set, because that's a lot of vegans and plant-based eaters are struggling with certain legumes, but it's because it's not being properly made. And you got to soak it in baking soda 24 hours, like at the most. You have to boil it for like 5 hours. Like it's like beans is real. Like you can't just be like, oh, let me mix it up a little bit. Yep, eat it. Like, no, it's the process. And even when the beans are done that first day, it's not done until you reboil them the second day.
Wow.
And people don't know these like basic things that are part of my, Afro-Indigenous culture, that I want to like bring to the space, and that I share the same culture with different people who are from the Circum-Caribbean, which is like, you know, a Florida going around Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, and then African spaces, and then
cassava for sure. Yeah.
And then Southeast Asian spaces and all that kind of stuff. Like we share in a lot of these, you know, cultural food traditions and agriculture traditions that are really very sustainable and have sustained us and allowed us to survive slavery, colonialism, mass migration, forced migration, all of this stuff. And we're still alive. Like we've been through it. 500 years has not been easy, but we're alive, and it's because
galactically and all sorts of ways. Like there's a reason why they were eating like that. Like we're not going to just change the paradigm now. Believe me, that it's a survival thing that has become more than sustainable. The planet has been moving in a certain way, and we've been trying to keep it this way.
Way. Yeah, and we just have to. It's a decolonization process, and that's why, you know, I really instinctively created Faddish Veganish to move in that way of thinking about plant-based foods, vegan foods as just like full fat indigenous traditions, Afro. I think I say like African, Asiatic, indigenous traditions, like an intersection of those, because those have really, with my family, particularly my Jamaican family, that those have been very much attached to how we just are, and, you know, how we be in our space. Like that's just how we are, and those really inform us.
Right. I mean, that's it. The show has been awesome, like for sure, man. Caleb, you want to do your notes like you like to do at the end?
Yeah.
I mean, we could sit and talk about this. I definitely want to have you back on for sure, Lisa.
Definitely.
It'd be great to have you on with some other folk as well. We haven't done like a great group episode, but I mean, we've just had such power hitters coming in that, you know, each person can take their hour and just keep going. So I appreciate it. I hope you felt comfortable with speaking and you got some great things across. You know, all the people that watch our show, or the ones that will watch it in the future that aren't watching it live, will just definitely benefit from this. And definitely check her out. Definitely change your food process, how you talk to people. All of this has to have intention. It's not about, like you said, weight or anything else. Let's cultivate community. Let's cultivate our environment. Let's do it. So Caleb, any notes? For sure.
Yeah, I mean, the whole show was just absolutely fascinating, and it really allowed me to, you know, sit back and listen again and be able to, I mean, frankly, realize just how awful my race can be, you know. And
I don't want to come up with that. Caleb,
that is not what we talked about today.
Caleb.
No, it's not that, but it's also
we're just bothering it.
Go ahead, Caleb. No,
it's no, you're totally fine. It's also just understanding, you know, and that's the whole point. That's what I love being able to have this show, and also this episode in general, is it allows me to just become more aware. And I think that right there is what we all need, is to become more aware. And I'm just very thankful that I was able to learn more tonight. You know, I think, and I say that with every piece of my heart in that, you know, being able to just be thankful of learning. And I know that's not exactly what you were saying, but
no, don't take offense. We were just joshing it.
No. I was not taking offense at all.
Okay.
No, actually, I welcome it, to be honest. To be blunt there, but no, it's been a really, really insightful episode, and I feel like this entire series has been that way for every one of our guests.
They speak their mind, Lisa. Yeah, don't think that you're the only one that's like, burn everybody. No, we've had some guys like, And like not to interrupt Caleb, but like you said, your family's been doing this for years. I mean, when you brought that up and you're like, yeah, I'm actually a descendant of a huge rebellion that actually worked. You know what I mean?
Well, it worked, but then they killed 400 of us and then persecuted 1,000 of us. So that
very
also
subversive ways. If you talk about some Jamaican history, even with the males, and we can get crazy with that stuff. But for sure.
There's just some realities where repression really did destabilize. And then now I understand why I'm here is because of the repression and the migration due to that repression. So I had to understand some things. And then for me to be able to tell this story and the importance of it. Because all they wanted was their land and the government out of their face, or the colonial government out of their face to live the way that they wanted to live, with food sovereignty, land sovereignty, community,
and womb sovereignty,
and without white supremacy. And the British government said no. And then we said, okay, burn it down. And then they said, we'll repress you. And then, out migration. And then Lisa's here.
I think that's how it went. It was like, no, I feel you too, Caleb, because I'm learning too. You got to remember, I mean, I'm also a male. So there's a lot of spaces that I don't even understand. Like, you definitely brought in the strength of the matriarch. Like, so far we've had, well, we're going to have another guest coming on March 10th, but we've had some like phenomenal leaders in their own right, just straight up matriarchs, alpha women. And that's another thing we did want to kind of access. I know there's like some bonus content because people don't normally stay for the hour, but I'm sure they are. But just to show like how much as the Mother Earth or the soil, because I did say womb protection as well, because what we consume will come out in our children as well. So obviously you're a product of good food because your grandmother's been eating well, and so a lot of this does have a lot of connections to our own being. And just as just shout out to our women for cultivating and keeping culture and keeping our food correctly and making sure that all just goes. Like, I often think about soil and Mother Earth and how we are all born from our mother's soil in in the general sense. So I think that means so much to everyone that you're touching today, so for we can all step and like kind of bow to this divine feminine and this grace. Because I don't know, I've learned that I need to work on growing some more plants for sure, because there's something to it, spiritually, and just talking to the plants and actually seeing how it develops over time. It means a lot. So look, see, he's you guys both have plants. I don't
yeah, but don't pay attention to this orchid. I got it from my mom, gave it to me as a present, and I love orchids. And so I was just like, I hope it blooms again. But if not, it is not mine. It was a gift, and I have not responsible.
I did not do this.
Because I know that orchids are very, you got to be very specific with orchids, and I'm not a orchid person. So, I'm a viney spider plant person. I'm a do your thing, run wild, Nazi dread, run wild.
You need some water, some sunlight.
I'm not particular, like what do you need today? I can't. I'm not with those, like ferns are not me either. They're very temperamental. Like, you have to also understand like the personality of certain plants and how they move, especially if you're in urban areas, and not like in the Caribbean, like with tropical plants. But thank you.
Yeah, unless you had some other stuff, Caleb is gonna close us out. Talk to us.
I think we could close out, and I would love to, come again at some point in time whenever you're ready for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. We can actually talk about that right after we finish this real quick too. Yeah, well, you've been listening, you've been watching the Identity Podcast. It has been such an insightful episode, and I hope that we all have learned in some sort of aspect on here, and also if you are watching or listening as well. Don't forget that we are brought to you by Find Your ID NYC. You can go ahead and like us on Facebook, check us out on all social media platforms such as YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, wherever we're on there. I promise you, at the Identity Podcast, check us out there. You can actually listen to the Identity Podcast on all streaming platforms, which is pretty cool. Don't forget to follow us on all those platforms as well. You can listen to the podcast on Brick Media every Tuesday. And if you love the Identity Podcast and want to sponsor us, well, you can do so. Email us at press@findyouridnyc.com for more information. We are celebrating Women's History Month, so happy Women's History Month for the month of March. We're very excited.
Starting off strong.
We're very excited.
Lisa,
all of our guests this month are do identify as women, so we're very excited to have that. And thank you, Lisa, for coming on. It has been such a thrill to discover your identity and to learn from you and to become more aware of everything. I was not expecting to learn as much as I did. I have like a long page of notes over here. I've been jotting down. You're like, man, this kid's quiet because I'm writing the whole time.
Lisa gave us a lot of homework. She's like, you may be vegan, but I got some stuff for you to do over here. You know?
But wait, there's more.
Right, exactly.
But very exciting stuff for the month of March for the Identity Podcast. We're continuing our environmental and sustainability series. And next Wednesday, March 10th, Sustainable Change featuring Alina Bassi. Amazing person. Definitely stay tuned for that episode Wednesday, March 10th at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time. As always, I am your co-host, Caleb, along with my fellow and lovely co-host, Tarik.
Appreciate everyone. Thank you for listening.
Such a joy.
Joy? I hear that.
Yep. It's the Identity Podcast. Well, everyone, stay groovy. Have a good one.
Lisa Betty, who's still with us. Thank you, everyone. If you guys would just check her out, just give her some love for sure. See you guys.
All right.
Peace,
See everyone. Catch you next week.